Our next guest today is passionate about connecting and building communities to create a more inclusive world. He's worked at Microsoft, tech startups, and was head of business development at Local Logic. Today, Naoufel Testaouni is the co-founder and CEO of QueerTech. And QueerTech is an organization that aims to queer the tech world. Please join me in welcoming Naoufel to the stage. Nice to see you in real life.
You also. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm going to remove this.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're
I'm
welcome.
super
Love the glasses.
excited. Oh, thanks. I like your pearls.
Thank you.
Nice. Okay, so I'm so excited about this conversation today.
Me too.
And I wanted to just start with a little bit of background about, what really motivated you to start QueerTech? Why did you do it? Why did you see a need for this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I tell a joke today that being a CEO of QueerTech makes me become a full-time homosexual. So I'm gay by day, gay by night, and it goes back to really. So I grew up in Morocco, right? And it's a relatively conservative country.
Yep.
And also, just like it's not easy to be gay there. And so as growing up, it was one of the things that marked me is that you don't see any visibility, right? And have role models. And as I moved to Canada, Canada is a very open country, right? We're very ahead in human rights, but yet you still see that 50% of LGBTQ people are still in the closet at work, right?
50%.
50%. So
That's
one
shocking.
out of two people still don't talk about their sexual orientation at work. And there is a lot of reasons which we'll touch base on. But I've been involved in the tech ecosystem for about 10 years. And every time I go to conferences and I will ask, is there any LGBTQ people? We won't see people, right? There was very little of us or none of us present at this event. And that was one of the motivators to really start becoming visible and starting a community group to bring people together so we could be part of the industry and be part of this community.
Great. And so it's about community building and exposure. How big is this community that you've developed?
Yeah, as of yesterday, we are 6,150 people across Canada.
Wow.
We have about a couple thousand in Montreal. I know, no one would believe that there's so many of us in tech in Montreal, but we are here.
We're here. We're here. Great.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned that 50% of students, or sorry, not students, 50% of queer folks are in the closet at work.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, why that is. Is it just a bad match between employee-employer, or why are those folks feeling like they can't show up as themselves?
Absolutely. So there are two groups that we'll touch base on. One is we'll talk about students, right?
Okay.
Because this is where the problem starts. STEM students, and a lot of research people have reported that one, they already when they go into STEM, which we all know inherently is very male-dominated, cisgender, heteronormative, white. A lot of students that go into that careers, a lot of times they don't stay in these programs because one, either they don't feel like they belong there,
right,
or they've had issues with discrimination, harassment. There is also issues with people just report that students are burdened by educating their peers, right? If you're a trans person, if you're a non-binary person, if you're a queer person, you always have to feel that need to be educating people. And it's a huge burden that not everyone is willing to take. And so a lot of people leave STEM.
Okay.
And that's how we lose people. Then there are people who continue and make it through the programs and then they get into tech, right? And now there is also similar issues. So a lot of the people who get into tech, because we talk about barriers getting into tech, but there is also barriers staying in tech, right? And these barriers are also anything from harassment and discrimination that still happens. But a lot of people feel that they can't, they conceal themselves because they don't want to miss out on career opportunities. They don't want to miss out on mentorship opportunities, and they don't really want to have that need to be educating their colleagues. And this is why it's very important for companies to have training programs around LGBTQ issues or diversity issues, racism. This is why companies should have policies in place to allow people not to be burdened by educating other people.
Right. Okay. You mentioned companies, and I'd really like to dig in a little further
Yeah.
about not only what they should be doing, but also maybe what students and potential employees should be looking for. I think you and I both know that there's a lot of pink washing
Absolutely.
out in the world.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's safe
yeah,
to say.
yeah.
Sometimes it's a little bit of BS.
Yeah.
So, do you have any tips for queer folks about how to choose safe spaces where they can thrive?
Yeah. So I think the community now it's becoming very vocal about companies who are not really doing things beyond just parading in pride, putting their logos, or you'll see June 1st, everyone changed their logo on LinkedIn and it has
Yes.
rainbow colors and tweet one or two things. But I think a lot of companies are now under evaluation.
Okay.
And we're seeing more and more tech companies are more conscious about diversity and creating bringing diverse group into them. Things that they are doing, now it's very popular that every company will have a diversity committee, which, still BS in my opinion, because you ask them, what are you doing? And it's like, well, we have this diversity committee, and that's all it does.
It's not an action.
It's not an action, exactly. Then you have companies who, as they grow, create employee resource groups. Now, I think those have more impacts because employee resource group are people from the community driven by the community, right?
Yeah.
Black people will have a Black resource group. Queer people will have a pride or a rainbow groups. And these groups are really important to create that sense of belonging for people. And then we see a lot of companies that are going beyond that, right? Where they have training programs for their employees, either on different diversity issue, on queer issues, on racism. We see a lot of companies who are instituting policies, right? Zero tolerance to harassment, racism, things like that, that really makes people who are looking for a job and looking to get into these companies feel more safe as they go through that process.
And they know that there are rules that have teeth should they
Exactly.
experience
Exactly.
some kind of harassment or discrimination.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, red flags to avoid, maybe?
Yeah.
We talked about some green flags. What about some red flags if you are in the job market?
Yeah, so, today, everyone who's looking for a job today should feel a bit lucky because it is a job market for employees.
True.
Companies are growing fast and can't even keep their employees in or get new employees. So it is a great market to apply for jobs. And I think this is the first time where I tell everyone, don't settle for a company that is not going to be aligned with your values and what you're looking for. A lot of people, you want to apply for a job, but take a moment to look at really the values and then few questions that will help you through the interview. One, I always ask, what are your diversity initiatives, right? If they just tell me I have a diversity committee, I'm like, BS. Okay, red flags, no. What
Red
is this
flag.
committee does? Oh, we meet once a quarter. Okay, great. Well, continue meeting. Maybe you're not the right fit for me.
Okay.
Then you have, the next question is how big, depend how big they are, you'll ask about employee resource group. These are a really great way to tell you if they have an employee resource group, you're gonna have a support system internally, right? A support system in terms of having that sense of belonging. They'll probably have a mentorship program. They'll probably have guardrails, support. So that's a really good way to see what they're doing. The next one also I ask them, are you partnered with other community groups? So a lot of companies are gonna look into being partnered with different organizations like Black Lives Matters or Queer Tech or any others that serve different minority groups. It's a way to show that they are connected to the community, they're doing efforts to support these communities. And I think those actions speak louder than any of the previous one because that means they're investing in these communities to grow.
For sure. And I also appreciate a company who knows that maybe they don't have all the answers and there are people external to them who can, they can work with and collaborate with on that. I feel like that shows a little bit of humility in terms of corporations. We already have questions on Slido. If you'll allow me to just
go ahead.
break away here.
Yeah.
We have one that says, "Hello from Brazil.
Oh, wow.
We need more leaders like you. Here in our country, a soccer player is doing the same in soccer, helping players." Oh, it's just actually a comment.
Yeah.
Richardson. Okay, well, I guess, this shows that visibility matters.
Absolutely.
We've got another question actually that just popped up. Do you see an evolution in an employer or a company mindset and culture in terms of diversity and inclusion? Have you seen it evolve since you founded QueerTech 5 years ago?
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
'Kay.
I think even when I go back 5 years ago, most of the companies we worked with was the large companies. It was the Google and the Microsoft and the IBM. People have, they've had employee resource group, they've had investment. I think today, even our partners goes from companies that are still 2 people. I see startups that reach out and they're like 2 co-founders and they're already thinking about their diversity, right? I think this is something that we have not seen before. People, especially in that early stage startup, spent a lot of time focusing on their product, on investing money, surviving. But I think they see it now. Part of that survivor is also to look for that diversity early on. I think the second one also is, we talked about these diversity committees. There are, every startup now has one. I think everyone feels the need that they need to do something about it. A lot of time, they don't know what to do, which is fine. I think this is where create that committee and start brainstorm ideas and then reach out. I mean, either to QueerTech or other organization that can support you to create that strategy, right? Training people so we're seeing more and more commitment to diversity. I think also we are starting to get away from what is diversity and why it's important. I think the first 3 years of QueerTech, we've done so many panels on diversity that we start to do panel anti-diversity because it was like, can we stop talking about this and move on to the next stage? And I think now it's like we are starting to see that next evolution where people are putting more efforts to change their job descriptions, to make it more gender neutral, to make it less male focused, So we're seeing a lot of steps that companies are doing. Recruiters also are becoming more trained on how to interview trans and non-binary folks and creating that environment.
Okay, so there's like a general awareness raising that's occurred in the past 5 years. Wonderful. I'd like to talk a little bit now about like the power dynamics in the workforce.
Yes.
I'm curious, about how you were mentioning retention is an issue.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what are some of the ways to not only hold on to, but support employees who are in the workforce, and also, between colleagues, like what is a way for allies to step up and really help to make sure that their queer colleagues are happy and are flourishing and are staying for a long time?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 2 parts to the question. The first one is like, it's very clear reasons why companies or people are leaving companies, right? We talk about the great resignation or great research or great, reassessment. And this is impacting not only queer communities, but everyone at the workforce. People want career transparency. People want to have a better trajectory to their career. They want to have mentorship. They want to feel supported. These are things that internationally, queer communities have always reported that they feel companies they worked at lack. They didn't feel supported. And even sometimes when they come out, maybe there is not enough support from the company around educating their colleagues and stuff like that. And also career trajectory. Mentorship always happened that you connect with someone when you work in a very heteronormative white environment. Maybe the managers and the mentors will pick someone who's like them, that they see themselves in. So a lot of these people were left out, right? And I think now we're talking about, pay more attention to everyone in your company and create this program to retain people. The second part is, what can everyone do? So there is 2 things. Being an ally, I feel, is the status quo. Everyone today is an ally. Everyone is, you can be an ally to women, you can be an ally to black people, you can be an ally to queer, like everyone, and it's just the status quo. What I want to see is more active allies. And active allies is you go a step further than just tolerating or accepting people, just having that gay friend or that black friend or feeling tolerating or open and being more proactive, right? If you hear a homophobic comments in the office that someone says, you should stand up.
Shut that down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You should do that. And I think it is more powerful that it comes from a peer for these people than someone, again, from the community that's always like, oh, you're exaggerating, oh, it's a joke, and people feel shut down. I think it's powerful when an ally stand up for someone from whatever community and speak. If there are protests happening, go participate in it. If there is supports around different laws, go support these communities, right?
Yeah.
So do something that a little bit require an effort on your part than just accepting that status quo.
Okay, yeah. So I'm hearing, don't just be a bystander. You got to show up or shut up, basically. Yeah.
Exactly.
We have more questions here, which is great. Someone is asking, are you noticing that companies are opening up top leadership positions to the LGBTQS workers, or is there still kind of like a ceiling that...
There is still a ceiling.
Yeah.
I think there is a desire to change that from a lot of companies, but it's going to take time to get there because all the senior leaders and people who are on the path to become senior leaders have always been people from communities that have already been served, right? White, male, cisgender, heterosexual. And I think companies are starting to think, you need to create mentorship program, you need to create coaching program, and you need to handpick certain individual from this community group and put them on these tracks for success. You can't just expect people to get there on their own. I think there is gonna have to be a system. I think another thing we're seeing is more and more queer and trans leaders are coming to the front and talking about their experiences, talking about trying to be role models and trying to be visible, right?
Yeah.
And we need that, right? We need to have more queer stories in the media and queer people in tech in the media. You need to have that visibility so you can inspire other people, because your first step to even success is you're gonna need to come out of the closet and be authentic, because that's a huge barrier that people have between being in a company and being comfortable and feeling authentic.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you talked about being in the closet, being a barrier. We have another question that's asking about, the context of coming out at work. I have to maybe read this a couple times to make sure I'm phrasing it right, but in the context we live in now, not coming out of the closet can be more detrimental for mental health, ? So maybe the question is, being closeted, what is the effect on mental health? Yeah.
Absolutely. So in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of research on this. So a lot of people have always believed, well, my work is my professional environment and I have my personal life, and people I work with don't need to know who I sleep with, and maybe people thought that was correct, but we have so much research that show that people who are in the closet at work do suffer from a lot of mental health issues. They suffer from additional stress. Think of the efforts that it takes to always conceal yourself. You always have to think of alternative stories. Now you have to remember the stories that you're telling your colleague. So there is so much burden that you're carrying in that environment. And when you have that, you're also not going to be in the front to want to be performing and being visible in the company, because you're just trying to keep a low profile and survive, and that's not how you succeed.
Totally. Having a double life is exhausting.
It is exhausting.
It's true. I wanted to touch on something that you were talking about just a little bit earlier about, being visible and, trans leaders to the front and LGBTQ leaders to the front. I'm curious if you think there's a fine line between, platforming and making visible these people and tokenism. Is that a danger to you that you think, how do you walk that line as a company, or, even as a queer person? How do you make sure that you're not falling into that trap?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, if you are a startup or a company and you have that one black person in your team, don't put their photos everywhere. It's just no one wants that.
And everyone
don't put
knows
them
what you're
front
doing
and center
too.
on your webpage, on marketing, on your. people will find out very easily. I think more and more people from marginalized group or visible minorities are all trying to avoid that. No one wants to be that token gay or that token black person. So I think you can ask people to be part of your strategy to attract other people and represent that community and go and reach out and get more people. But you have to be very careful because you will be called out on it now.
Yeah. And everyone knows what you're doing, too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so
Well,
obvious.
because you look at the team and you're like, wait, there is that one black person, and now I see the image everywhere, and it's like,
Everywhere.
okay,
Look how diverse we are.
yeah.
I have a question here about how small companies with maybe less resources find tools to commit to diversity.
There are so many tools out there
free,
now.
right?
Absolutely, there is a lot of it. I think what's really important is this a priority for you or not?
Yeah.
Because a lot of time people are always like, well, I'm so busy. I have all these things. I have to like fundraise, and the reality is everyone is busy. Everyone has so many priorities, and do you believe that diversity is going to be a priority for you? And are you looking to hire? Because if you do, you will find resources. There are so many resources. As I mentioned, we have startups that reach out to me and ask about questions. You know, they're like 2 people and they're like, hey, we're hiring for 2 roles. Can you help us promote this to your community?
Hey.
A great initiative. Like, hey, can you have a look at the job description and give us feedback?
Nice.
You know, things like that. Just reach out to someone. And it's gonna be very rare that someone's gonna tell you, no, I don't want, like 80% of the time, 90% of the time, people are gonna be very happy to support you and help you, but you're gonna have to make it a priority.
Okay, so take the first step, look up queer tech. That's a
Absolutely.
good first step. I have another question here, maybe on the same vein of sort of recommendations, but do you have any queer leaders that we at Campus Party should be looking to as role models or people to follow and watch and listen to?
There are a lot of entrepreneurs who are queer, and there is so many startups. I mean, everyone talk about Lightspeed because
I was about to say.
because that's the first person that comes on the
Yeah.
list every time. I think DAX have been used as the token gay for this industry for a long time. But there are a lot of startups people can look at. So there is on Queer Tech we promote a lot of the names, so you can find some of the names on there. But Silofit has a queer founders. They are a gym membership that's on demand. That started a little bit before the pandemic, and it's growing. There is another leader called Polisa who has Enkidu, which is another cool leader in the productivity tool scene.
Cool.
So it's really just it just matters. People need to be visible, but also you need to do a little research.
Yeah, do some research. Great. I'm totally going to switch gears here just a little bit,
Yeah.
but you're from Morocco.
Yes.
I love Morocco. You worked in the United States,
Yes.
and you found yourself in Montreal.
Yes.
So, what have you noticed about the tech ecosystems, or even the queer nightlife or queer life
Yeah.
in each of these places? And why is Montreal unique, or is it unique, or like what is? I'd just love to hear your perspective
Yeah.
on these
Yeah.
different places and why Montreal is maybe,
Yeah.
a good place to land. You like it?
So really funny, when I went to university in Morocco, and the program that I went to had a joint program with the university in Quebec. And my mom signed me for that program back then, and I hated the idea for doing that extra credit because I was like, I would never move to Quebec. It's so cold in there.
I was about to say, the
Like
winters.
I'm never moving there. 10 years later, fast forward all this, I was like, I lived in New York City. It was a really great experience, and moved to Istanbul. It was also great. And then I was looking at the next place, and I was hesitating between Toronto and Montreal. And
Ooh.
somehow, anyone that I talked to will, with no hesitation, just go Montreal.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, fine. I'm gonna go and visit Montreal and see what the fuss is about the city. And I think I came here for one weekend, and I was like, this is a city I want to move to. I think the queer scene is amazing and big, and the art scene is great. Also, after leaving Microsoft, I really wanted to stay in tech, and Montreal had a really great ecosystem that was really growing back when I joined it.
Nice. Okay, so between Montreal and Toronto, this is always the big,
Montreal.
Yeah.
Montreal for the win. Always.
It's so funny. Everyone always compares them and then like leans into Montreal,
Absolutely,
I think. Absolutely. So, way back when you were in Morocco and you were trying to figure out your path, if looking back now, what do you wish someone had sort of, advised you or told you about your career that you could have used?
Oh my God, so many things. So many things. So one of the things I tell, especially, so I'm going to go back to students because when you leave university to your first job, it's the biggest transition that you're going to do to that professional career. And about 54 or 56% of students in Canada go back in the closet also on their first job because one, they either the same reasons that people stay at the job is they don't want to miss on employment opportunities, they don't want to feel discriminated against, they're not sure how to manage their queerness in that professional environment. And I tell you don't have to do that today. If you go in an interview and you feel that you have to conceal yourself, you don't have to work for that company because there is so many companies today that value that diversity and you should be putting that front and center. Tell your employer, put it in your resume. It's for once, it's gonna start working for you instead of against you.
Great. Okay. I feel like I love this evolution, just put it in the top line of your
put
letter.
It. I don't know, put glitter on your resume and
loud and proud.
Whatever you want. Put it, whatever makes you visible to that group, I think. Yeah, because people in university are very active in different queer groups and queer initiatives, and a lot of times they just remove them from their resume, right? Because they're not sure. And I say leave it there because I think it becomes being involved in activities at university is a huge plus now for employers. Yeah. And being queer is just a wonderful an added value that you can bring in.
Hell yeah, absolutely. I have another question here. Let me read it. It's a long one. Is it a good solution to ask directly to your employees who are minorities how to deal with all of this? Would they feel empowered by this, or would it be ethical to ask LGBTQ and minority employees what you should be doing as an employer?
Yes, I think you can. I think a lot of so there is a fine line between asking people and getting their opinions and also pushing them to be at the front of the issue, right? I think if you ask people are always willing to help and share their perspective on what you should do, but you need to remember that not everyone wants to fight your battles.
Yeah.
And this is something that goes in general with even women in tech. A lot of startups I work with, if you are the woman, you are becoming the person who represents that company at every woman in tech event. You're sitting on that chair and talking about how tech is inclusive. And somehow women, people of color, queer people have inherited this problem and they have to be in the forefront. And it's not true.
Yeah,
I think the majority needs to be at the forefront because that's how we're gonna change it, Yeah. If you're white and straight and you can still sit there and talk about diversity and also fight for those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, going back to tokenism, what we were talking about earlier, you want to make sure that you're not siloing people into that one spot. Absolutely. Cool. Well, we've got about 2 minutes left. I don't know if anyone actually in the real life room has any questions or anyone else on Slido wants to put one in here. Everyone's shy in real life.
I know. This is the first event I came to since 19 months now, so it's terrifying to be sitting in there and talking in public. We need to get used to it.
I know.
This is like a good warm-up now.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for your generosity and your insights. You gave us lots of tools and resources to use. How should people follow you, stay in touch?
LinkedIn is the best way, but I'm on Twitter, Instagram, I don't know.
Great.
Whatever.
You're visible.
Just put Naoufel.
Yeah.
It's not a very common name, so you'll find me very easily.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming to Campus Party Canada and all the amazing work you do for the community.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone, let's give them a warm round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll give you like a little
Yeah.
nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you in
Yeah.
real life.
You're